September 11 is one day Americans are not in a hurry to forget. It was the day on which 19 men believed to be Middle Eastern terrorists hijacked 4 American passenger jets and used the planes as guided missiles to attack symbolic targets on the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now, while 2 of the planes struck and brought down the whole of World Trade Center in the city of New York, another hit the Pentagon. Now, the 4th plane reportedly went down in the Pennsylvania countryside owing to the resistance of the hijackers by passengers. Now, this devastating string of attacks killed some 3,000 Americans. In the hours and days that followed, the U.S. and foreign intelligence units had identified a Saudi millionaire living in exile in Afghanistan by the name of Osama bin Laden as the man who had coordinated the deadly attacks. Barely 3 weeks after the attacks, former President George W. Bush gave a speech before a joint session of Congress, making an outline of America's line of action to counter the unfortunate incident of September 11. In the middle of that speech, Bush thanked the Congress for its leadership, but also categorically declared, "Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, the terrorist network associated with bin Laden, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group is found, stopped, and defeated." However, that goal was not only going to be lofty, but proved to be a long walk for American government and its allies. Over time, key figures within Al-Qaeda, including Yahya al-Libi, had been eliminated by the U.S. Perhaps what seemed to be the climax of the war on terror came when news broke on the 2nd day of May 2011 that the former arrowhead of the terror organization, bin Laden himself, had been killed by the U.S. Navy SEALs of the U.S. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, also known as SEAL Team 6. But the road to countering terrorism and extremism just gets longer.
The entire world is appalled by the brutal murder of Jim Foley by the terrorist group ISIL. Jim was a journalist, a son, a brother, and a friend. Jim was taken from us in an act of violence that shocks the conscience of the entire world. He was 40 years old.
While a video of James Foley's murder released by the Islamic State on August 19, 2014 shocked the world, particularly the US, Stephen Sotloff was also beheaded just a few days down the line, as seen in a video entitled His Second Message to America. David Gauthorne Hine, a 44-year-old British aid worker, had been captured in early 2013 and was later beheaded in September of 2014. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant took responsibility for all executions. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, now often referred to as Islamic State of Iraq and Syria or ISIS, used to have a different name. It was known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq. US troops and allied Sunni militias defeated Al-Qaeda in Iraq during the post-2006 surge, but did not destroy them. The US commander in Iraq, General Ray Odierno, described the group in 2010 as down but fundamentally the same. In 2011, the group reared its head again. ISIS successfully freed a number of prisoners held by the Iraqi government and gradually but steadily began rebuilding their strength. Overall, terrorism evidently poses far more danger than it did in the past, according to new data first made available in an official US State Department report released in May of 2014. Almost 7,000 more people were killed in terrorist attacks worldwide in 2013 than in 2012, almost all of them by Al-Qaeda or other jihadist terrorist groups. Terrorists also wounded and killed more people than they did in the prior year. ISIS, however, seems the biggest and most troublesome at the moment. Since pledging allegiance to Al-Qaeda in 2004, the group's goal has been remarkably consistent: to found a hardline Sunni Islamic State, or what is now popularly called Caliphate. It is believed that ISIS is intent on seeing to the complete failure of the government in Iraq, where it fights to establish a caliphate. Over the years, there have been many signs that the relationship between Al-Qaeda Central AQC and the group's strongest, most unruly franchise, the ISIS, was strained. Their relationship had always been more a matter of mutual interest than of shared ideology. Consequently, ISIS and Al-Qaeda divorced in February of 2014, signaling the end of a decade of strategic collaboration between two of the world's deadliest and most violent terror groups. After ISIS split with Al-Qaeda in February 2014, owing largely to the group being too brutal even for Al-Qaeda itself, the Islamic State's goal remained the same. Today, ISIS holds a fair amount of territory in both Iraq and Syria, a mass roughly the size of Belgium. Curiously, the Islamic State does not even seem strong enough to topple the Iraqi or Syrian government at present. However, one thing striking about the ISIS, they are incredibly ambitious, think ahead, and are abundantly committed to their expansionist Islamist ideology. Perhaps the single most important factor in the recent resurgence of ISIS is the conflict between Iraqi Shias and Sunnis. ISIS fighters themselves are Sunnis, and the tension between the two religious sides, it's a powerful recruiting tool for the terror group. 43-year-old Ibrahim ibn Awad ibn Ibrahim ibn Ali ibn Muhammad al-Badri al-Samarai, more popularly known as Abu-Bakr al-Baghdadi, is the caliph of the self-proclaimed Islamic State, located in western Iraq and northeastern Syria. He is believed to have studied up to doctoral degree level at the Islamic University of Baghdad. Here is how he stokes the fire that drives the ideology of the ISIS.
شهر يقام فيه سوق الجهاد فكان صلى الله عليه وسلم يعقد فيه الألوية.
Today, ISIS and Al-Qaeda compete for influence over Islamic extremist groups around the world. Some experts believe ISIS may overtake Al-Qaeda as the most influential group in this area globally. The extremist group has also had allegations of rape and sundry sexual abuse leveled against it. In a report released on October 2, 2014, the United Nations stated that based on 500 interviews with witnesses, ISIS had taken between 450 and 500 women and girls to Iraq's Nineveh region last August, where 150 unmarried girls and women, predominantly from the Yazidi and Christian communities, were reportedly transported to Syria, either to be given to ISIS fighters as a reward or to be sold as sex slaves. Issues bordering on funding for the Islamist group have equally raised concerns, not just for the American government, but from all across the world. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is said to be the richest extremist jihadist group in the world, boasting about $2 billion in mid-2014. Terror organizations like the Al-Nusra Front and ISIS are better investments for those who fund the group. The individuals act as high rollers, providing seed money. Once the groups are on their feet, they are perfectly capable of raising funds through other means, like kidnapping, oil smuggling, and selling women into slavery. The US believes ISIS is taking in about $1 million a day from all sources. The largest source of cash for ISIS, as US officials believe, is oil smuggling along the Turkish border, with ISIS leaders willing to sell oil from conquered Syrian and Iraqi fields for as little as $25 a barrel, a quarter of the going world price. Other previously lucrative sources, like kidnapping for ransom, are not what they once were. According to one US official, there are only so many rich Syrian businessmen. In the same vein, there are fewer banks to loot. The chaos in Syria has allowed ISIS to hold this territory very securely. This is a big deal in terms of weaponry and money. The war in Syria is said to have given ISIS a lot of access to heavy weaponry, even as the extremist organization is said to have funding stream available to it, courtesy of local businesses and the oil and gas sector. Today, it has become clear that the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria now has the United States and its allies to contend with, even though he had told Americans and the world that the United States had no strategy in place to propel any attacks against ISIS, for which he came under fire from within and outside of the US. President Barack Obama had outlined a line of attack, declaring that this is going to be a long-term project.
On my orders, America's armed forces began strikes against ISIL targets in Syria. Earlier this month, I outlined for the American people our strategy to confront the threat posed by the terrorist group known as ISIL. I made clear that as part of this campaign, the United States would take action against targets in both Iraq and Syria, so that these terrorists can't find safe haven anywhere. I also made clear that America would act as part of a broad coalition, and that's exactly what we've done.
American campaign is hypothetically designed to address Islamic State's occupation of territories in Iraq and Syria. The theory is that simultaneously pounding ISIS in Syria and Iraq, the US believes will give the group nowhere to retreat to. According to an October 2014 report, al-Baghdadi, leader of ISIS allegedly suffering from serious injuries, had fled the Islamic State capital of Raqqa due to the intense bombing campaign launched by coalition forces. He has sought refuge in the Iraqi city of Mosul, the second largest city under ISIS control. Committing 1,800 troops on its own, the US has enlisted the support of allies, including Australia, Belgium, Britain, Canada, France, Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and states from the Gulf region, all of whom have equally committed troops, funding, and equipment.
We were joined in this action by our friends and partners: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, and Qatar. America is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with these nations on behalf of our common security. And more broadly, over 40 nations have offered to help in this comprehensive effort to confront this terrorist threat, to take out terrorist targets, to train and equip Iraqi and Syrian opposition fighters who are going up against ISIL on the ground, to cut off ISIL's financing, to counter its hateful ideology, and to stop the flow of fighters into and out of the region.
But while an array of strategies is being rolled out, US Vice President Joe Biden has a strong word for the ISIS.
If they think the American people will be intimidated, they don't know us very well. We came back after 9/11. As a nation, we're united. And when people harm Americans, we don't retreat. We don't forget. We take care of those who are grieving. And when that's finished, they should know we will follow them to the gates of hell.
As far as Vice President Joe Biden is concerned, going the full length is evidently some sort of a one-way traffic. Committing 1,800 troops, the US has enlisted the support of allies including Australia, Belgium, Britain, Canada, France, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom, all of whom have equally committed troops, funds, and equipment. I am Uyi Agumofo Egbe.